one of the shows that I done recently over on the Kev Baker Show, I was lucky to come into contact with today's guest via Bill Bean. And I had no idea just the depths of the story that we were about to scratch the surface on over on the Kev Baker Show. And in the back of my mind, I always knew that Mercedes would be joining us here today. We're finally here. We finally got you on. And Mercedes, it's great to talk to you again.
Hi. This is the Mercedes Lucke-Benedict Show, coming to you live on Web Radio Network. On today's show, we have the amazing gentlemen Borges and Jason Guillemette from UAP Studies Podcast. You're listening to the Mercedes Lucke-Benedict Show. Monday, we had a live recording, and there were some technical difficulties with the show. So if you tune in for the live version on Web Radio Network streaming on Spreaker, you will find that the first 7 minutes of the show, 7 minutes and around 30 seconds, are non-existent. So I have created this intro specifically for you, the listener, because you don't want to miss this show. We have the most incredible gentlemen from the UAP Studies Podcast. We have Jason Guillemette and Louis Borges, and they were fantastic. Everything that we talked about was so awesome, and I had a wonderful time with them. So I wanted to make sure that we had a great introduction to them. When you listen to this, you will hear the beginning parts of Louis speaking. And he's talking about their new adventure, which is going to be on a brand new network. There was so much amazing content that I'm going to divide this show into 2 segments. So stay tuned for part 1 of the UAP Studies Podcast interview.
Not just because we're newly joining, but it's a good network, and we approach them because of the fact that they are. So we highly recommend the NX network.
I just find that so interesting that it's like Jason had started this during the pandemic and the MUFON. So Jason, the MUFON, I find that absolutely fascinating now that I've really looked into that. I've heard of that before, but I've really been looking more into it. And I think that's one of my questions for both of you is, can you talk about your have you had your own, you have all these people that have investigations on your show. Have you had your own type of investigations? It's kind of like you're starting have you had your own investigations? I know the MUFON you probably have, Jason, but what about both of you? Could you kind of talk about that?
Well, I don't personally do investigations. I'd rather talk to people far more seasoned at it than myself. Quite frankly, okay. I just don't have the time. Otherwise, I'd be all in with MUFON as well. But Jason's been an investigator for a while, so he can probably shed some light on some interesting stories.
Okay.
Yeah, well, my main thing when I joined MUFON was to investigate British Columbia, especially the lower part of British Columbia where we live, the Fraser Valley, because I had done some investigations on just who is the main investigator for MUFON on the Pacific side, and there was nobody. So I decided, well, why not me, right? And at one point, I think I was the only MUFON member or investigator in BC at the time, and I'm not sure if that's been changed or not. I'm sure a few other people have joined, but that was my main thing. And one of the cases that I loved, which is now done, it's complete, so I'm able to talk about it, was in Hope, BC. And this kid was on a sort of a cliff near Bear Caves, I think. It's near Hope. And he was filming the Fraser River, which is a large river that we have here in the Fraser Valley. And an object came out of the river at Mach 3.2. We calculated it with a guy from MUFON that does these calculations. And we did an analysis compared to the train track, and there was a train cart that was on the track. So we know that this object was about the size of an F-150. And it came out from underneath the water at Mach 3.2. And it never broke the surface. Just this smooth, flawless from underneath the surface up to the air. It was amazing. And that really got me hooked at that point. Not to say that I've done any investigation with MUFON as of late. I have not. The podcast has really taken most of my time, unfortunately, in that regard. But we are still investigating by investigating the investigators, which is, and asking them questions. And that's a really cool part, because I think we're learning more about ufology now than we ever have before, because we now have a platform to be able to invite these people on and learn from them.
Exactly. I love that. And I understand both points, that you would do investigation or not. So, Louis, with you, not being investigating yet, but you are definitely helping the investigators by having creating this format to bring them in. And I love all your questions, how you guys have incredible questions and content. And incredible guests, I must say. I was writing down a list of them. We are talking about Grant Cameron. It's Cameron? Cameron, right?
Cameron, yeah.
And Jeremy Ray, Jason McClellan, I think is how we pronounce that. Richard Dolan. One I really enjoyed watching today was Reverend Michael Carter. He's something else. So
he's cool.
I love. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I mean, there's so many top names in the UFO and the paranormal world, and that kind of brings me to one of my questions I have to ask, and that is one of the things I hear so far in your shows with a lot of people, especially where the government investigations are concerned here, is that people will, as they go up to debate what something is, whether this is the truth, like the government, oh yes, aliens are real, and then they put somebody else to be a skeptic. So they have, like, the press, the legacy media is being a skeptic, but yet they still want everyone to be pulled in. So it's like this chess game. Can you talk about that? How do you feel about that? Do you feel the same as I do?
Well, I'll go first, Jay. I think the media and the government act two different ways. Media is looking for interest. They're looking for views. So usually they will have both sides. Otherwise, people scream at them and say, how come you only presented one side? So media has to appear unbiased. Therefore, they have to have. So I think that's okay. Again, we could do a whole show on the media's reluctance to talk about this topic. But just to answer your question, I think they do that skeptic thing for views. In terms of the government, I've kind of changed my views a little bit. I used to think wholeheartedly they all know and they're just doing whatever they can to silence us. I think now 90% of the people in government are well-meaning people. They're hardworking people. They actually feel like they want to make a change. I mean, why else would you volunteer to do such a difficult job where everybody's going to hate your guts? Or at least half the people will hate your guts, the half that didn't vote for you. So to get into that and to take that level of punishment, you have to like it or feel like, you're doing it for something. But I think there is a small percentage, and that's pretty evident through these clandestine programs where the military arrives at a crash scene and this other agency that's not even marked will show up and say, no, we got it from here. You don't have clearance for this type of stuff. So I think even at the top level, at least what we think is the top level, they really aren't. And there is this other, call it a shadow government, whatever you want, but there are other people that really know what's going on. I just think the implications are so big that they can't have everybody know because they're trying to keep it a secret. So that's my newfound belief in government. I'm not as pessimistic as I used to be.
Oh, hey, that's very good.
Well, I was going to say that just recently the Department of Defense got in hot water because, again, there's missing money. They can't account for billions of dollars that are just, they don't have receipts for them. They don't know where the money goes. And when you start thinking about the good way to leak the money to these clandestine programs is through the Defense Department. I mean, a couple of years ago, the people were making fun of the fact that somebody had charged $1,500 for a hammer. Like, that hammer better be coated in gold. Like, that's crazy. $1,500 for a hammer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, again, you were talking about the media and how, or the critics and all that. The media has a hard time taking it seriously. They do want to take it seriously. The problem is that they always end up with a cliche opening where, it's the X-Files music or, it's dark. They show lights and the flying saucer comes across. Like, they can't help it. Like, they have to add some sort of like, hey, let's just breaking the ice here and then addressing the issue. But it's not doing any service to the actual topic. The topic is the most serious topic. Number one, there's nothing higher than that. If we're being visited by one or multiple entities from different locations, that's top news. Nothing else will trump that, right? For decades. So that is the most important part. And I think CNN is starting to take it more seriously. You're starting to see a little bit more seriousness. In Canada, we have a hard time getting anybody except Vice News to take it seriously. Like, if they do play it on our channels over here, which is always 2 weeks behind the United States, it's always very, very fast and always added at the end with a bunch of puppies to end, the program and make you feel good, right? So it's a big problem. I think the media needs to pick up, and the critics aren't doing any service to the topic either, because most of the time you'll have an investigator that's in the field, and then the critic does no work. Never been in the field. They just criticize the work of the other person. So that's a huge issue.
One of the shows was also talking about, kind of in relation to that once you get on a show or even an interview with a news clip or a news show, they will cut it out. They will edit it to kind of fix it to their narrative. And I always think that's a little, that happened to us we were on the Dead Files. So the family, they filmed for weeks, with 2 weeks, with our family, but it's all cut, into, a 45-minute show. So it's a lot, and I understand that both of those ways, that it has to be that way for the media. One of the questions I was kind of thinking about was, for you both, is who were your inspirations as children growing up? I mean,
hey Santi, your vitals are looking good. How's the pain today?
Same.
Well, it's about to get a whole lot worse. Did you hear your team just tanked again?
Come on.
Yeah, I want to help you feel better, but I don't know how to treat a losing streak.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, man, get a touchdown.
At Banner University Medicine, this is what care sounds like. Connecting with you where you are. Banner University Medicine. Exhale.
Did you think about aliens then, or this type of phenomenon back then, or what was your progression, and who was your inspiration? Whichever one, and please tell me.
So for me, I didn't have any alien inspirations growing up. I wasn't really into the topic. I had a weird encounter with the Northern Lights. I've had some poltergeist stuff happen. And I was a science-minded kid through, high school and university and that type of thing. So and again, being a spiritual person, I didn't want to just minimize sort of creation. If creation is what we think it is, why would it be so limited as to just put life on our planet? So the more I learned about astronomy and science and just numbers, it just made more sense that, okay, we don't know, but it's very, very rare the chance that it's going to be just us. So I got more into the topic, I would say probably early 2000s, and just became an enthusiast, started reading books, watching documentaries, and mine went from there. So I didn't really have any any heroes in that field. Since joining the field, I have a ton of heroes, and I'm very blessed to have interviewed most of them with my best buddies. So my opening has been in the last 2 decades, let's say.
That is so great. I love that. And I love that you're best buddies. What a wonderful thing that is, that both of you get to be on this together, and how it's just become so successful. That's awesome.
I think I communicate more with Louis than I do with my own wife. You know what I mean? I text him all the time, and we're always talking on the phone or on a podcast or a show. So, yeah, I'm starting to think that I speak more to my buddy than I do with my own spouse. It's crazy.
I definitely fight less with Jason than I would my spouse. I don't think I've ever had mixed words with Jason ever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so marriage is different for those reasons.
You guys are so funny. I totally get that, because I'm like always trying to fix this, work on my shows or work on my podcast or my music. So I totally understand. And well, with Jason, what about you? I know that you actually had an experience, I believe, that changed your life. Were you more of this like as a child too, or did it just become after certain experiences that you had?
Well, when I was a kid, I really enjoyed Unsolved Mysteries. I absolutely loved that show, and they kept showing some episodes where people were abducted by aliens. And I always had an open mind to that. I never thought that people were lying, because why would they lie about something so over-the-top ridiculous? And when I was 13 years old, they just solidified it for me when we had a craft fly above our heads, came from behind, and it was only 80 feet above our heads, and it shined its light on us as it passed over us, and we just watched it continue up to a row of houses and then turn and then proceed over the top of a bunch of trees. And I just remember thinking back then, like, well, of course they're real. Like, why wouldn't they be real? People say that they've seen them. I just saw them, and that was it. I never shut up about it. I mean, for years, you keep telling people, the experienced people, are you sure it wasn't a plane or a helicopter? And I always say this is very easy. I'm almost 42 years old now. I have 42 years of being a human experience. I know what we're capable of, what we're not. In 1994, we were not capable of this craft, whatever it was that flew above our heads. It wasn't around back then. And that really motivated me at that point. I started taking books out. I didn't take out communion for quite some time because of the scary alien head that's on there. Like, for the longest time, I never even bothered with it. But John Mack was a huge influence, and Bud Hopkins was a huge influence. And I think from the onset, it's always been about the alien abductions that I've been more focused on. I like the sightings. I like the cases that we have on crash retrievals and all that. But I always think that if you wonder why they're here, look at what they're doing and look who they're doing it to. And maybe by collecting that data, and I don't think there's enough data on that, to sort of figure out, well, what is it about these people that makes them so special that they're selected somehow in this process? And that's always fascinated me. And that's really where I would like to spend my expertise, if you will, or expanding my knowledge of. This podcast has really helped with that.
Oh, that's actually awesome. And have you guys? I'm sure you have David Pilates. I'm not quite sure. I think it's Pilates. Maybe not. Yeah, that was. But missing 411. And there's so much connection between what is happening to these people. They're just disappearing. And I love his investigations. I was saying, boy, it'd be great if you guys could have him on your show.
We got lots of irons in the fire, so we'll just see.
I love him. And then we recently got the new movie and watched that. And, it seems to me that the way it works is there's like some aggressive ones. A lot it's just peaceful. Like, we've honestly had if I would have known about MUFON, I would have known who to report these events to. Now I do, because we've had a total of 4 different sightings on this property.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness. 2 of them, well, Joe, my husband, saw 1. I've seen 2, and it was huge. It was as big as a baseball field. as big as that. Like it was that big, and people saw it. It went right over our house, and it went all the way into like Marana and hooked up to going towards Phoenix, and people were still seeing it. And this was last year. And, so this happens out here because we're out in the country, but we've seen it. I just think it's our land and what's on the land that it seems we have this type of a lot of different phenomenon. So yeah, knowing about MUFON for me, Jason, is excellent because I'm calling MUFON. Next time I see it.
Nicely done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have pictures of it. So so another one that I would like to talk about is on your show, when you are speaking with these people, these excellent people, who's your favorite? What's your favorite topic so far? Has there been like more than one, or is it all of them? What interests you so much more, do you think, when they come on, when people talk with you?
For me, I wouldn't say we have a favorite. Every guest is about a slightly different topic. And in a lot of cases, they're firsthand. So it's not like they've been reading a bunch of books and here's what they found out. No, they were there. Like we interviewed John Burroughs last week. He was at the Rendlesham Forest. The books and the movies are about him and his partner, right? So,
right.
Yeah, so we're getting it firsthand. And the thing I find interesting is we kind of make some notes. I make some notes. Jason makes notes. We don't really compare. We just kind of go for a natural flow. But it's amazing how conversation changes direction. And I look back at the notes after the show. We didn't cover half the stuff I wrote down because I didn't want to stop the flow of where it was going, because it was better content than it would have been if we just try to say, well, let's go back 20 years and talk a bit more about that. You're interrupting it. So I kind of use the notes as just sort of bulletin points. If they come up, great. If we get stuck for something to ask, which doesn't really seem to happen, but it's more of a safety net to know I have material. And it's amazing on how it just takes on this organic thing. And we've had people on our show that have told us stuff they've never said on any other show. And I think That's a huge compliment when it's coming from that caliber of a guest.
I definitely think that's amazing. What about you, Jason? How do you feel on that?
You know what? We covered a lot of subjects that I didn't think that I would end up being interested in. One of them was poltergeist activity and, UAP-related poltergeist activity, like the Skinwalker Ranch, for instance. Talk about Bigfoot, cryptids, all that stuff. I was like dead set when I first started. I am not interested. I don't think it has anything to do with this phenomenon whatsoever. No interest. And as I kept talking to people, they're like, no, you need to look into this, dude. There's like a connection. And it was guest after guest after guest. And then by the time that Louie and I really started taking off, they were like, yeah, you need to check into Bigfoot. Like, there's a connection there. It's like, oh, okay, now we're going down the rabbit hole. And it really is. Like, it just, I keep saying that this, the study of ufology, or UAP, if you will, it's almost like a college course or a university course that, you would have to take 4 years to just get the basics of what the hell is going on, right? Like cover the history of it, all the big cases, and, the different aspect of the phenomenon, the abduction phenomenon, the medical problems that people have with interactions with these crafts, because there's tons of that documented. There's just so much that as we're talking to people, we keep discovering these new topics, which leads us to other guests that are specializing in these topics. And it's crazy. Like, I think Jacques Vallée, Louis, that said suspend all judgment.
That's right, yeah. I mean, Jacques Vallée, we've had a few people say basically to the same effect, where, hey, after decades of studies, what do you think now? And they're all like, we changed our mind a bunch of times. Used to think this, fought it hard, and then if you're a real scientist, you go where the data is, you go where the evidence is. So suspend judgment, because if you really are seeking the answer, it may not come into packaging you're going to expect, or even like, for that matter. But if you really want to get to the bottom of it, you have to take everything in. And it's hard because there are a lot of shows out there right now, and I won't name any names, but there are people on these shows presenting myth and legend as if it was factual. So it's fine if you want to have a cryptid-based show. It's fine if you want to offer your opinion. But you need to distinguish that this is what I think, not, oh, it's been proven, or words to that effect. Lore is lore, myth is myth, and a lot of people are getting bad info that are really just have a an interest or a curiosity about the topic. And then I hear so many people say things like, I heard somebody say on a show the other day, it's proven that we have alien DNA within our DNA. That's not true. That is 100% not factual. You cannot say that. There is unknown DNA, junk DNA, things that we don't quite understand about our own DNA. There very well may be an alien connection, but it has not been proven. It is not okay to just say that because you have a platform. So I would say Jason and I are more about integrity and sticking to fact. There's a lot of people that reach out to us. We'd love to have them on the show, but we just can't back up what they're saying. And in the world of trolls, and we don't want to get our head ripped off for giving somebody a stage that doesn't deserve one. But so to answer your question, basically, a lot of the big guests, including Jacques Vallée and all the rest, they basically just said, suspend judgment.
You heard it right there on the Mercedes Lucke-Benedict Show with Louis Borges and Jason Guillemette of UAP Studies Podcast, one of the best podcasts on the air right now. This is part 1 of a series of 2. So stay tuned for part 2. It's coming soon. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show, streaming live on Spreaker and the web radio network. This is the Mercedes Lucke-Benedict Show. You can find me on Facebook and YouTube. Please enjoy my music.
Every time that I've ever been knocked down, every time that I've ever gotten back up to face another round, I let go of my fear and put my pride down. I'm building my castle in heaven, climbing over mountains with the lessons I've been given. I'm building my castle in heaven. My castle is not made of mortar or stone. My castle is made from the seeds that I've sown. I'm building castles in heaven. Every challenge, every mistake, every time that I choose faith, I grow strong. I keep moving on and on and on. And I'm building my castle in heaven. I'm climbing over mountains of lessons I've been given. I'm building my castle in heaven. My castle is not made of mortar or stone. My castle is made from the seeds that I've sown. I'm building castles in heaven. Every moment, every day, every word that you say, every step along your way, every time that you make a mistake. Every good deed that you do, each time that you win, each time that you lose, each time that you walk in another shoe. On this earth where we grow strong, when we learn to forgive and we right our wrongs.